The fluorescent lights of the foster care center hummed with a monotonous drone, a constant backdrop to the restless energy of its young inhabitants. For Serafina Rafi Dubois, a 17-year-old black girl, the noise was a familiar, unwelcome companion. Mismatched furniture and the scent of stale cleaning products defined her world. Orphaned young, Rafi had found solace not in the fleeting friendships of the center, but in the quiet, dusty corners of its meager library. There, nestled amongst forgotten paperbacks, she would escape. Her slender fingers tracing words on worn pages, her mind miles away from the cacophony. Her quiet demeanor often led others to overlook her, or worse, to mock her. She carried an old, tattered sketchbook, its pages filled with intricate drawings that she guarded fiercely, knowing they would only invite scorn from the other teens who preferred boisterous games to silent creativity. Every evening, the dinner bell would clang, signaling another meal in the echoing cafeteria. Rafi would pick at her bland food, a solitary figure amidst the clatter of forks and the boisterous laughter of groups she never quite belonged to. She'd observe the dynamics, the alliances, the subtle cruelties, all from a detached distance. Her isolation wasn't just physical. It was a deeply ingrained defense mechanism, a quiet resignation to a life of perpetual otherness. One particularly dreary afternoon, a cacophony erupted from the common room. Leo, a timid 6-year-old, Rafi's unofficial ward, was sobbing, clutching at his empty hands. A towering 14-year-old Mark sneered down at him, dangling a worn, stuffed rabbit just out of reach. "Look at the baby crying for his toy," Mark taunted, waving the rabbit playfully before tightening his grip, ready to tear it. A flash of something primal ignited in Rafi. She could have walked away, as many others did, avoiding conflict. But seeing Leo's tear-streaked face, his small body trembling, resonated with a deeper instinct within her. She moved swiftly, not with aggression, but with a quiet, unwavering presence. She stepped between Mark and Leo, her eyes, usually downcast, now sharp and direct. "Give him back his rabbit, Mark," she stated, her voice low but firm, devoid of any tremor. "He's got nothing else." Her unexpected intervention, her calm authority, caught Mark off guard. He hesitated, then, unnerved by her steady gaze, begrudgingly tossed the rabbit back to a sniffling Leo. Rafi then knelt, gently comforting the younger boy, helping him carefully smooth the rabbit's torn ear, a quiet act of kindness that went unnoticed by the other teens, but cemented her deep compassion and quiet courage. This was Rafi's save the cat moment, a silent testament to her protective nature and inherent goodness. As the days blended into weeks, Rafi continued her solitary existence, punctuated by her quiet acts of defiance and compassion. She'd often retreat to a hidden nook in the library, a space she had claimed as her own, to read and sketch. It was there that she'd secretly pore over the handful of old, yellowed letters she occasionally received. They arrived sporadically, bearing a faded, ornate postmark from an address she didn't recognize, written in elegant Chinese ink on brittle paper. These weren't typical correspondence. Interspersed within the flowing script were intricate architectural blueprints, almost like encrypted puzzles, or obscure chemical formulas she couldn't comprehend. She kept them meticulously hidden beneath the loose floorboard in her closet, a private world far removed from the center's stark reality. Around her neck, almost always tucked beneath her simple t-shirt, hung a thin silver chain. On it, a small, intricately carved pendant rested against her skin. It wasn't a locket or a charm, but a crest, a stylized, multi-layered design featuring a soaring falcon over a cascading waterfall, bordered by an unfamiliar geometric pattern. It was an unusual piece, clearly old and deeply personal, hinting at a lineage far removed from her current circumstances. She rarely touched it, but its weight was a constant, subtle reminder of a past she knew nothing about, a silent question mark hanging over her identity. This hidden correspondence and the enigmatic silver pendant formed the seed of mystery, subtly hinting at a complex, powerful heritage, quietly sowing the seeds of curiosity about Rafi's true origins, and setting the stage for a dramatic unveiling. The hum of the foster care center's fluorescent lights had become a grating background noise, a constant reminder of Rafi's confined existence. One unseasonably warm afternoon, however, a sharp, authoritative knock echoed through the flimsy door of her caseworker's office. Raffi, who was dutifully organizing files, paused, a knot of unease tightening in her stomach. Her caseworker, Ms. Albright, emerged moments later, an uncharacteristically formal expression on her face, clutching a thick envelope sealed with a prominent, old-fashioned wax crest. "Raffi," Ms. Albright announced, her voice a strained monotone. "This is for you, from the estate of Elara Vance." She handed Raffi the letter, her gaze unreadable. Raffi took the heavy parchment, her fingers brushing against the unfamiliar texture. Elara Vance? The name stirred a vague, distant memory, a shadowy figure from her parents' past. A forgotten aunt, perhaps, but someone Raffi had never truly known, let alone met. The formal summons, requesting her presence at a will reading, felt surreal. An invitation to a world she knew nothing about, yet one that held a tantalizing, if terrifying, sliver of hope. A whirlwind of conflicting emotions assaulted Raffi. Skepticism warred with a fragile flicker of hope. Why her? Why now? The foster care system had taught her to expect disappointment, to brace for the worst. She imagined a cruel joke, a clerical error, or perhaps a distant relative, seeking to foist unwanted responsibilities upon her. The thought of stepping into an unknown, potentially hostile family environment filled her with a familiar dread, the fear of rejection a constant companion. Yet, beneath the apprehension, a deeper, almost primal yearning stirred, a longing for connection, for belonging, for a life beyond the monotonous routine of the center. The letter, cold and formal as it was a crack in the wall of her insulated world, a whispered promise of a different future. She looked at the elegant script, the wax seal, so unlike anything she had ever encountered. The address listed for the will reading was in an affluent part of the city, a place she had only seen in magazines. The sheer incongruity of it all left her breathless. Could this truly be her chance? Or was it just another mirage, destined to fade and leave her even more disillusioned? The internal struggle was fierce, a battle between self-preservation and a desperate, burgeoning curiosity. The day of the will reading arrived with a chilling precision. Dressed in her best, albeit ill-fitting, borrowed dress, Raffi felt like an alien stepping onto another planet. The grand, imposing Vance mansion, a monument to old money and forgotten legacies, loomed before her. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of old money, polished wood, and barely concealed disdain. The room was filled with faces she didn't recognize, all pale and impeccably dressed, their eyes following her every move. Leading the charge of hostile gazes were Richard Vance, a distant cousin, whose sharp suit and even sharper eyes radiated avarice, and his wife, Victoria Vance, a woman whose perfectly coiffed blonde hair and condescending smirk spoke volumes of her self-importance. They were impeccably dressed, their expressions a mixture of cold curiosity and outright contempt. Richard, with an exaggerated sigh, gestured vaguely towards Raffi. "So this is the orphan?" he drawled, his voice carrying just enough for everyone to hear. Victoria snickered, her eyes raking over Raffi's modest attire with open disdain. "She certainly doesn't look like a Vance, does she?" The hushed whispers that followed, the open mockery of her race, her background, her appearance, were a direct, brutal assault on her dignity. This wasn't just a will reading, it was a public trial, a declaration of her perceived unworthiness. The instant, visceral rejection from her supposed family slammed into her, hard and unforgiving. This was the point of no return. There was no retreating to the safety of anonymity now. She was exposed, challenged, and utterly, irrevocably plunged into a conflict she hadn't chosen, but could no longer escape. The quiet girl from the foster center was about to face the storm head-on. The opulent library of the Vance mansion, typically a sanctuary of hushed reverence, now crackled with an almost palpable tension. The heavy velvet drapes and towering bookshelves, laden with centuries of knowledge, seemed to mock Serafina Raffi Dubois' humble presence. Richard Vance, a man whose tailored suit seemed to shrink his already small heart, leaned back in his leather armchair, a sneer playing on his lips. "Honestly, Victoria," he drawled to his equally haughty wife, Victoria Vance, I still can't believe Alara would even consider this. His gaze swept over Raffi, lingering on her simple dress and the faint smudges of charcoal on her fingers. It's an insult to the Vance name, bringing in some street urchin from a foster home. Victoria snickered, her perfectly manicured hand covering a disdainful smile. Perhaps she thinks a few pretty words will get her a handout, Richard. Some people just don't understand class. They were the quintessential Type A antagonists, their every word dripping with a toxic blend of greed, snobbery, and thinly veiled racism, their sole motivation to secure the inheritance they believed was rightfully theirs. The air in the room seemed to thicken with their contempt. Raffi, though outwardly composed, felt a familiar knot of shame and anger tighten in her stomach. She clenched her hands, her nails digging into her palms, a desperate attempt to anchor herself against the onslaught of their prejudice. Just then, the large mahogany doors opened, and a tall, distinguished man with silver hair and piercing, intelligent eyes entered the room. This was Elias Thorne, the executor of Alara Vance's will. He carried a worn leather briefcase and moved with a quiet authority that commanded immediate attention. He was the helper, his presence a beacon of calm amidst the storm, though his true role and understanding were yet to be fully revealed. He took his place at the head of the long, polished table, his gaze sweeping over the assembled family, lingering for a fraction of a second on Raffi before settling on Richard and Victoria. He held a thick, aged parchment in his hands. As Elias Thorne began to speak, his voice calm and measured, outlining the formalities of the will reading, Richard Vance interrupted him with a dismissive wave of his hand. "Let's cut to the chase, Mr. Thorne. We all know who the rightful heirs are. Just get to the part where you confirm it, and we can all go home." He shot a triumphant glance at Raffi as if to say, "You don't belong here." In her suppressed fury, Raffi's hands trembled. Her old sketchbook, which she had clutched tightly in her lap, slipped from her grasp and clattered to the polished floor. Its worn cover splayed open, revealing not just her intricate sketches, but also the small silver family crest pendant that had been tucked inside for safekeeping, now glinting under the chandelier's light. The pendant, usually hidden beneath her clothes, lay exposed, its unique design clearly visible. This was Raffi's unveiling, an accidental revelation born from her emotional turmoil, but a powerful one nonetheless. Richard and Victoria scoffed, barely glancing at the fallen sketchbook. "Oh, look," Victoria simpered. "The little artist. Does she think her scribbles will impress us?" Richard laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "And what's that cheap trinket? Trying to pretend you have some lineage, girl?" They were too consumed by their own arrogance and disdain to truly notice the details, dismissing them as mere childish trifles. They continued to mock her, completely oblivious to the profound significance of the crest or the complexity of her drawings. Their blindness, fueled by their prejudice, was a testament to the dramatic irony unfolding in the room. However, Elias Thorne, with his keen, observant eyes, had not missed it. As the sketchbook fell, his gaze had instantly sharpened, lingering on the exposed pendant and the glimpse of the intricate architectural drawings within the book. A flicker of surprise, then a knowing, almost imperceptible nod, passed across his usually impassive face. He recognized the crest. He recognized the style of the drawings, so uncannily similar to those he had seen in Alara Vance's private collection. He said nothing, his expression remaining neutral, but a silent understanding had passed between him and Raffi, a silent acknowledgement of a shared secret. He knew that the true game had just begun, and the Vances, in their hubris, were about to play directly into Raffi's hands. The grand library, with its towering shelves of leather-bound volumes and the scent of aged paper, morphed into an oppressive arena for Raffi. The weight of the Vance legacy, usually a source of quiet dignity, now felt like a crushing burden. Richard and Victoria Vance sat across from her, their faces contorted with a barely concealed mixture of greed and disdain. Their eyes, sharp and predatory, never left her, scrutinizing her every subtle tremor. They were certain of their victory, reveling in the public humiliation they believed she was enduring. "Mr. Thorne," Richard began, his voice dripping with false concern, "before you proceed with the rest of the will, there's a small matter." Aunt Alara, in her eccentricity, often included little tests for those she deemed worthy. A sort of intellectual scavenger hunt, if you will. He produced a scroll of parchment from his inner jacket pocket, uncannily similar to the style of Alara's letters. This, found among her personal effects, clearly states that any unexpected claimant must solve a specific riddle, a final demonstration of intellect and lineage. Victoria smirked, adjusting a pearl necklace. A little something to weed out the unsuitable, she purred, her gaze raking over Rafi's unassuming figure. Rafi's heart hammered against her ribs. She recognized the parchment's style, but this test felt utterly foreign. Elias Thorne, the executor, picked up the scroll, his brow furrowing as he read the complex, almost cryptographic riddle inscribed upon it. It involved intricate knowledge of obscure alchemical symbols and ancient architectural principles, subjects far beyond common understanding. Richard then pulled out a stopwatch, placing it on the polished table with a theatrical flourish. "You have precisely 5 minutes, dear cousin," he announced, his voice oozing condescension, "to solve this. Fail, and you forfeit any claim naturally." He leaned back, crossing his arms, a picture of smug confidence. Rafi felt the blood drain from her face. 5 minutes? To solve a riddle that looked like something pulled from an ancient text. The room seemed to shrink, the air growing impossibly thin. The other distant Vance relatives, observing from the periphery, either snickered or averted their gaze, unwilling to offer even a shred of support. Elias Thorne, though his expression remained neutral, shot a quick, almost imperceptible glance at Rafi, a flicker of concern in his eyes, but he could not intervene. The test was presented as an integral part of Alara's eccentric final wishes. Rafi was utterly alone, facing not just the Vance's scorn, but a formidable intellectual barrier designed to expose her perceived inadequacy. Richard cleared his throat, enjoying her discomfort. "Tick-tock, little orphan. Time is wasting. Perhaps you'd prefer to just admit defeat. It would save us all a good deal of time." Victoria added, "Some things are simply beyond one's station, wouldn't you agree?" Their words were hammers, pounding away at Rafi's self-worth, pushing her closer to the brink. She felt the pressure building, an unbearable weight. The complex symbols on the parchment blurred before her eyes, threatening to overwhelm her. The sheer impossibility of the task, combined with their malicious glee, sent a wave of despair washing over her. She knew nothing of alchemy or obscure architectural principles. This was it. This was her hang-by-a-single-hair moment. Her entire future, her newfound fragile hope, dangled precariously on the edge of this impossible riddle. She was trapped, exposed, and on the verge of total collapse under the crushing weight of their expectations. Richard's stopwatch, a cold metallic eye, ticked ominously, counting down the seconds to her inevitable failure. The ticking of Richard Vance's stopwatch echoed like a death knell in the oppressive silence of the library. Rafi's mind raced, a frantic whirl of panic and despair. The complex symbols on the parchment, the cryptic language of the riddle, swirled before her eyes, an insurmountable wall. Richard and Victoria watched her, their faces alight with cruel anticipation, utterly confident in her impending failure. This was it. The very breath seemed to catch in her throat, every neuron screaming in protest against the impossible task. This was her breathless moment, the instant before everything was lost. Then, her eyes, scanning the ornate details of the room in a desperate plea for inspiration, landed on a small, almost imperceptible etching on the fireplace mantelpiece. It was a stylized falcon, its wings outstretched, eerily similar to the crest on her silver pendant. Her hand instinctively flew to her neck, her fingers closing around the familiar cold metal. The pendant, now clutched tightly in her palm, felt like a sudden jolt of electricity. A memory, fleeting and hazy, surfaced. The intricate patterns on the old letters from Alara Vance, the ones she had always dismissed as mere artistic flourishes. The architectural blueprints, the chemical formulas, the strange symbols. They weren't just random drawings. They were pieces of this puzzle, a language only a Vance could understand. A profound realization washed over Rafi, chilling her panic and replacing it with a surge of clarity. Her eyes, now sharp and focused, darted back to the parchment. The alchemical symbols, the architectural principles, they weren't arbitrary. They were a sophisticated code, a complex legacy hidden in plain sight, a secret language Alara had woven into her life and into the letters she sent to Raffi. Richard and Victoria had seen only oddities. Raffi, through her own inherent curiosity and the subtle clues Alara had given her, suddenly saw the key. With newfound purpose, Raffi ignored the ticking clock and the sneering faces. She pulled her worn sketchbook from her lap, its pages now her battlefield. Her charcoal pencil flew across the paper, not in random scribbles, but in precise, deliberate strokes. She began to draw, connecting lines, symbols, and equations from the riddle, mirroring the complex patterns she remembered from Alara's letters. She spoke, her voice initially soft, but gaining strength with each word, explaining the intricate connections, demonstrating a profound understanding of the ancient symbols and their architectural implications. She wasn't just solving a riddle, she was revealing a hidden lineage of knowledge, a shared intellectual DNA with Alara Vance herself. Richard and Victoria's confident smirks slowly dissolved, replaced by looks of utter bewilderment, then dawning horror. Raffi completed her final stroke, placing the sketchbook firmly on the table, her solution a precise, elegant architectural diagram, accompanied by a series of corresponding alchemical equations. "This," she stated, her voice clear and resonant, "is the answer." The alchemical symbols represent the structural integrity, and the architectural principles describe the hidden chambers beneath the Vance Manor, designed by our ancestors to protect their most prized research, a research into sustainable energy hidden from public view for centuries. Richard Vance stammered, his face ashen. "This is impossible. She cheated. She couldn't possibly know this." Victoria shrieked, "That's just nonsense. She's making it up." But their protests were futile. Elias Thorne, who had been watching Raffi with growing awe, finally broke his silence. His eyes, initially filled with professional skepticism, now shone with profound wonder and admiration. He slowly reached into his briefcase and pulled out another, even older parchment. "Indeed, Mr. Vance, Ms. Vance," Elias Thorne stated, his voice resonating through the shocked silence. "Ms. Dubois has not only solved the riddle, but she has articulated the very purpose behind it with startling accuracy." He unfolded the ancient parchment. "This document, a codicil to the original will, specifies that the true heir must not only possess the Vance family crest which Ms. Dubois wears," he indicated her pendant, now proudly displayed, "but must also demonstrate an innate understanding of Alara Vance's most complex intellectual legacy, hidden within this very riddle." Alara Vance believed that true inheritance was not just bloodline, but intellect and integrity. He paused, his gaze sweeping over the now aghast Vances. "And it is with this undeniable proof," Elias Thorne continued, his voice rising in triumph, "that I, as executor, declare Serafina Dubois is the sole and undisputed heir to the entirety of the Alara Vance estate. Every account, every property, every share, every personal belonging, all of it belongs to her, legally and unequivocally." He then turned his steely gaze on Richard. "As for your supplementary clause, Mr. Vance, it is a blatant forgery. I will be notifying the authorities of your attempt to defraud the estate." A collective gasp swept through the assembled relatives. Their faces, a tableau of disdain and greed moments before, contorted into expressions of utter shock, then disbelief, and finally, blinding fury and crushing defeat. Richard slumped in his chair, utterly broken. Victoria let out a small, pathetic whimper. The room, which had been a stage for Raffi's humiliation, was now the scene of her glorious vindication. The applause, hesitant at first, erupted into a thunderous ovation, a cascade of cheering and tears from those who had once judged her. Raffi, tears streaming down her face, looked at Elias Thorne, her heart overflowing with a gratitude that words could not express. Justice, swift and undeniable, had arrived, turning the tables on her tormentors and illuminating the path to her true destiny. The silence that followed Elias Thorne's declaration in the Vance library was deafening, broken only by Victoria Vance's choked sob and Richard Vance's guttural gasp of disbelief. The stunned faces of the other relatives, a tableau of shock and envy, were testament to the colossal shift in fortune that had just occurred. Richard, his face mottled purple with rage and humiliation, lunged forward, but was swiftly restrained by a security guard who had silently entered the room after Thorne's signal. His protests and threats were a pathetic, impotent display against the unyielding authority of the law and the meticulously crafted will. Within hours, the news spread like wildfire through the city's elite circles. Richard and Victoria Vance, once pillars of their social set, found their meticulously constructed lives crumbling around them. Elias Thorne, true to his word, had immediately initiated legal proceedings for their attempted fraud and forgery. Their assets were frozen, their reputation shattered, and the social ostracization was swift and brutal. The irony was palpable. In their desperate, prejudiced attempt to deny Raffi, they had lost everything they held dear, their greed consuming them whole. Their downfall was complete, absolute, and undeniably just. For Raffi, the immediate aftermath was a whirlwind of legal briefings, financial consultations, and the bewildering reality of immense wealth. She was moved from the stark foster care center to the opulent Vance mansion, now her undisputed home. The sprawling estate, once a symbol of her humiliation, became a canvas for her future. She was no longer just the orphan from the foster home. She was the sole heiress, Seraphina Dubois Vance, a name that now carried the weight of a formidable legacy. Elias Thorne, proving himself to be more than just an executor, became her steadfast guardian and mentor. He guided her through the complexities of her inheritance, patiently explaining the vast trusts, the real estate holdings, and the sprawling philanthropic ventures Ilara Vance had cultivated. But more importantly, he became a trusted confidant. He saw not just the heiress, but the brilliant, compassionate young woman who had endured so much. Weeks later, the initial shock had begun to recede, replaced by a quiet, burgeoning sense of purpose. Raffi and Elias sat in the very library where her destiny had been irrevocably altered. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, a stark contrast to the stifling tension that had once pervaded the room. Raffi, now dressed in comfortable but elegant clothes, held one of Ilara Vance's old, leather-bound sketchbooks, its pages filled with the familiar, intricate architectural designs she had seen in the letters. "Mr. Thorne," Raffi began, her voice soft but steady. "Why me? Why did she choose me? And those letters? The riddles? Why all the secrecy?" Elias Thorne smiled, a rare, warm expression that softened his stern features. Ilara Vance was a brilliant, eccentric woman, Raffi. She believed that true wealth lay not in material possessions, but in intellect, integrity, and a discerning heart. She had been quietly observing you for years, through a network of contacts. Your parents, you see, were distant relatives, cut off from the main family for daring to pursue their own intellectual passions outside the family's rigid expectations. Ilara admired their spirit. He paused, then continued. She saw your quiet resilience, your innate kindness, your sharp mind, qualities she believed were the true Vance legacy. The letters, the riddles, the pendant. These were her way of ensuring that only someone with a kindred spirit, someone who truly understood her unique perspective, would inherit her life's work. She didn't want her fortune to fall into the hands of those who merely sought wealth and status, like Richard and Victoria. She wanted it to go to someone who would not only cherish it, but use it for a greater purpose. She wanted you, Raffi. Raffi looked down at the family crest pendant, now proudly displayed outside her shirt, no longer a hidden secret. A profound sense of peace settled over her. She finally understood. Her grandmother hadn't just left her money. She had left her a mission, a legacy far more valuable than any inheritance. This conversation solidified her new path, a path where her intellect and compassion would finally have the freedom and resources to flourish, guided by the wisdom of a woman she had never met, and supported by the quiet strength of Elias Thorne. This was the true new calm, not just the absence of conflict, but the profound inner peace of knowing one's purpose. 5 years later, the Vance estate, once a monument to an old insular legacy, buzzed with new life, transformed by Seraphina Dubois Vance into a vibrant hub of creativity and learning. The grand mansion, with its sprawling gardens and opulent library, no longer felt imposing but rather welcoming, a place where innovation and compassion flourished side by side. Rafi, now a confident 22-year-old, had graduated with honors from a prestigious university, holding dual degrees in architecture and fine arts. Her vision, once confined to the pages of a tattered sketchbook, had literally been built into existence. Elias Thorne, her unwavering mentor and friend, often visited, observing with immense pride as Rafi navigated her burgeoning responsibilities. He had gracefully stepped into a role akin to a beloved grandfather, guiding her through the complexities of managing a vast estate and a burgeoning philanthropic empire. Their bond had deepened, built on a shared understanding of Alara Vance's true intentions and Rafi's innate desire to honor them. Elias had retired from law, dedicating his time to advising Rafi, witnessing the profound impact of Alara's foresight and Rafi's extraordinary spirit. The true testament to Rafi's journey wasn't found in financial ledgers or architectural awards, but in the echoing laughter and vibrant colors that now filled the transformed Vance estate. The former stables had been converted into state-of-the-art art studios, and the old greenhouse was now a vibrant botanical workshop. This was the home of the Alara Vance Legacy Fund, the non-profit organization Rafi had established. Its mission was simple yet profound: to provide free, high-quality arts, architecture, and science education to underprivileged children, particularly those from foster care backgrounds. On a sun-drenched Saturday morning, the estate grounds teemed with children, their faces alight with curiosity and wonder. Rafi, dressed in practical work clothes with a splash of paint on her sleeve, moved among them, her presence radiating warmth and encouragement. She stopped by a group of eager young artists, among them a now 13-year-old Leo, no longer timid but bursting with artistic confidence. He was sketching an intricate blueprint for a treehouse, his tiny brow furrowed in concentration. Leo, once a symbol of the vulnerability Rafi had sought to protect, was now a shining example of the potential unlocked by her compassion. He was one of the fund's brightest students, a testament to its profound impact. As the day wound down, Rafi stood on the mansion's balcony, overlooking the bustling activity below. Elias Thorne joined her, a quiet smile on his face. "She would be so proud, Rafi," he murmured, his gaze sweeping over the scene. "More than proud. She would see that her legacy, the true legacy, lives on in you." Rafi smiled, a deep, contented expression. She traced the familiar lines of the silver family crest pendant, still nestled against her skin. "It was never just about the money, was it, Mr. Thorne?" She mused, her voice soft. "It was about finding where I belonged, and giving others the chance to find where they belong too." The setting sun cast long shadows across the estate, illuminating the faces of children discovering their passions, their dreams taking flight. Rafi's scars, the invisible ones of her past, had long since healed, replaced by the deep fulfillment of a life dedicated to giving back. The family crest, once a mysterious emblem of an unknown lineage, now shone brightly, a powerful symbol of a profound second spring, where the seeds of kindness and intellect, once buried, had blossomed into a flourishing garden of hope and opportunity for generations to come. If this story stirred your heart, if it reminds you that courage can alter destinies and that light always finds a path even in the deepest darkness, please leave a comment. Share this story with those who need inspiration. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell to never miss upcoming narratives that delve into the profound human spirit and the power of unseen heroes. Thank you for joining the journey.